Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we are painting yet another figure from the Steamforged Games character expedition expansion. As you can see today, we are painting Havel. Now, Havel can be found in all Dark Souls games, I believe, from DS1 to DS3. So, without further ado, let's hop into it and start painting this dude. So, first step. We are going to prime the miniature with a black acrylic paint. Now, you can prime him more traditionally with just regular paintbrushes, or you can be a really cool individual and spray paint him with the airbrush. So in that way you can get kind of the misty details in there. However, I like the more traditional styles. We're just gonna brush him more traditionally, just trying to get into some of those crevices and nooks and crannies, and that way the black acrylic paint can really get into those grooves. So that way later on, when we prime him again with a lighter white paint, it can really bring out the details of those dark shadows. Alright, let me just paint this dragon tooth here, make sure that's all good and nifty. Fun fact, if you did not know this, apparently in Dark Souls 1, Havel, you can find his armor set and his weapon, luckily enough, in an Orlando behind an illusionary fireplace. You go downstairs and it's very dark. His armor is in, I believe, 2 chests, and his weapon's in another chest. But unfortunately, there is a mimic down there. Luckily, it's quite easy to determine whether or not it's a chest or a mimic, depending on the chain and which direction it's pointing towards. So if a chest has a chain on the right side that is pointing behind itself in kind of a hook shape or a backward C, then it's a chest. However, if it's pointing towards you like a question mark, that is a mimic chest. So you might want to watch out for that. Aside from that, looks like we are finished painting the first coat of primer on to Havel here. Alright, after the miniature has enough time to dry off with the black prime, we are going to now lightly brush some white acrylic paint onto him just to give some definition to his armor plates and various things. As you can see here, I'm brushing on my thumbs, and that way I kind of have a good estimate of how much paint is on the brush. Now, it is okay if you put just a little bit too much white paint on there, because that can just be added as extra highlight to the miniature. Unfortunately, since this is Havel, he's has armor made of appears to be kind of dragon scales, which is resemblable to stone. So we're going to try our best not to put too much white paint on there. However, if there is too much on there, we'll just try and darken it down later. Adding some more white paint on here just to bring out some of those shadows just a bit more. Paint some more highlights onto the armor here. Definitely trying to get underneath his legs here. Also trying to add some more detail to his weapon as well. Alright, now I'm going to add some lighter coats of white to the back here. It seems like there's not really too much to it, so let's add a little bit more, just give a little bit more detail or highlights to the armor, because later on, once we get to the details part, we're going to be painting different colors, and this will really help highlight and pop those colors out. But with that being said, looks like this part is done. Now we're on the final step, which is going to be details. Now, details for miniatures take up the most amount of time because you're probably trying to not get too much paint onto the details to really make them pop. With that being said, from the reference photo to my left, Apple kind of has a dark brown kind of cloth in the middle of his stature, so we're going to try and paint that in. Obviously, I'm using a dark brown acrylic paint to kind of really make it pop. Obviously, we're going to try and get the back of it as well. As from what it looks like, there's silver chains kind of holding those armor plates in the back. And in between them is the cloth, so we're going to try and paint that. Give some the leathery type of texture by adding a lighter brown to the cloth. I'm going to try and merge that in with the darker colors, just to make it look a bit more authentic. Now, when we're painting the smaller parts of details onto miniatures, we're usually trying to use a very small brush and that we can get into the gaps, but also trying not to smear any paint onto any of the extra parts, because that would just make the miniatures details feel a bit more sloppy. Won't really make the miniature look too good, so we're going to try and avoid that as much as possible. Alright, afterwards we're going to try and kind of dim down Hal's armor a bit. I see in the reference photo his armor has kind of a brownish tinge to it, so there is a way to acquire this type of color. We're going to be using a little bit of water here and combine that with a little bit of the dark apple brown bourbon color that we have, and really try and get into some of these grooves here. Now, you might not be able to see it too much on the camera here, but over time this will eventually try and give the kind of the color that we're trying to look for. With that being said, it's now time to go and paint the smaller details to this miniature, which would be the chains. I'm grabbing some silver acrylic paint here to really get some of the metallic features onto those metal chains that are holding his armor up. As you can see, I'm using a miniature brush, and that way it just only really gets the chains and doesn't really get too much on any of the other miniatures' armor pieces. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing for the front chains that are dangling from his cloth in the front here. Alright, now we are going to try and give some of that grayish texture into his armor sets. I got some gray acrylic paint here. See how well this works for his weapon and his armor pieces that are made of conic scales, which are made of stone. Might have to mix a little bit of lighter colors in here just to make sure that mixes pretty well. Give us the right type of contrast to the armor pieces. Now, before I forget, we are now going to try and paint the small silver chains on his gauntlets, which are iconic. Now, since the chains are so small onto his gauntlets, we're going to be trying our best not to put too much paint on the brush, but also trying to get enough on there so that where the chains can really shine out in detail. From painting his gauntlets, let's add just a little tiny bit of some paint on the back spines of his armor, plus some of the other smaller parts of his armor to really give it some extra detail to it. With that being said, he's pretty much finished. And let's go ahead and see the final result